Thanks very much, Desi. I really enjoyed that video. So just want to check with you, Desi. Can you see my slideshow? You can see that?
Yeah.
Good. And I'm just going to, for the moment, um, well, I'll keep that going. I'll probably actually stay. My focus will be on my larger screen for the moment, and then I'll change back to the camera once the Q&A starts and my slideshow finishes. So, as Desi said, my name's Rajko Jakovic. I'm a resident of Toronto, and my family has recently undergone a major renovation of our home, and part of that renovation was to try and make a step towards decarbonizing. We didn't go all the way, and I'll talk a little bit about that, how far we went and how much further maybe we could have gone towards the end. But we did certainly make some leaps forward, I like to think, for us. And there are a number of motivations for our family. It was, recognizing that there's a climate crisis, and having that knowledge, we have a young son, and being able to look, answer to him and say, well, if we knew about this problem, what did we do about it? So every small step in our minds counts. So that's essentially what the presentation will be about, what we did about it with our home. And obviously there's other things you can do in your life, but this is the focus of this presentation will be on our home and our renovation. One other thing worth mentioning is this was our project, very specific to our needs, our lifestyle, and our home and our property. So it was tailored to that. So it may not apply to everybody or everybody's project, or to nobody's, frankly. Everybody's project will be that undergoes something like this will be very specific to their needs and their place where they live and the property that they are living on. So with that, I'll get started. So the location of the home, for those that know Toronto, is just west of High Park, within this bubble here, and quite close to Lake Ontario. Well, why that's important is that our climate is moderated quite a bit by Lake Ontario, so we don't get the deep freeze that Northern Ontario gets, for example, which is quite important in terms of the systems that one would choose for their home. We're in what's called climatic zone 1. Which again ties you to the building code and what your requirements are to meet building code. The existing home looked like this. It no longer does, but this is what it looked like when we started. So it was about 1926. That's the earliest records that I could find for the home, and it's 1.5 stories, meaning there was a small room in the attic. What didn't even cover the full floor plate, just one room up there. It was about 1,018 square feet, not including the basement. And the building envelope, so essentially, what goes around it here, was a double brick system that was a structural system, uninsulated. We did make some changes initially when we moved in. Right away, we changed the windows. They were original windows, so we changed them to pretty conventional vinyl windows, double pane, insulated. We did immediately renovate the basement and insulate the basement with about R14. We blew in some attic insulation into the parts of the attic that did not have the room, as I mentioned. It was an oil furnace, so we changed at the time. So this was 2009, 2010, to a high efficiency gas furnace, and there was already a gas-fired hot water tank. So we just changed the oil furnace to a gas-fired furnace. So Oh, and there was some, we pumped in a cementitious insulator between the strapping of the brick walls. It's a non-expanding cement-based fill. It didn't do much for insulation, but we found it helped quite a bit for draftiness or air blowing through the house. So the house was reasonably comfortable for a 1926 home with the changes that we made. However, we had always intended, I think, to eventually do some form of renovation, because the layout of the house really didn't suit our family very well. So the plan was to take the roof off and add a full second story, and that to have sort of 3 bedrooms and washrooms on the second floor and a living space on the ground floor. So the proposed area was 1,690 square feet, not a lot larger than the existing home. The footprint of the house, the original brick footprint, would remain, and we had some overhangs at the front and the back, which you'll see in section a little bit better. The plan was then to significantly improve the insulation in the buildings and the systems. So we changed the windows to, again, they were double pane, but insulated fiberglass windows. The fiberglass windows perform better than the vinyl. They have insulated frames. We have some triple glazed windows in the house. I'll show you where those are on another slide. The envelope is now fully insulated. So we insulated behind the existing brick. And obviously we insulated the second floor, which would be a code requirement. And we changed the gas furnace from an air source, from the gas furnace to an air source heat pump with a backup electric auxiliary heat. I'll talk more about that later. And we got rid of the water tank, installed a gas-fired on-demand water heater. And as you can expect, the home had to comply with building code requirements, and that's the Ontario Building Code SB 12 requirements. They're prescriptive, so you have to meet certain requirements. There are other routes you can take and energy model the home. We didn't need to do that. It was quicker and easier for us to simply meet the prescriptive requirements, which we did. And in some cases, marginally exceeded them. So here's a section of the home, and this is important to demonstrate some of the passive strategies that we employed to reduce our reliance on mechanical heating and mechanical cooling. Being in a fairly dense part of the city of Toronto in terms of the size of properties, you don't have a lot of wiggle room, literally, to orientate the home or make certain orientation design decisions that would prove to be more effective. So we did what we could, where you can see we employed overhangs, which in the summer would keep the hot sun out and not shine directly into the home. But in the winter, when the sun is lower, the sun does stream in pretty well. Now, a lot of today's windows come with a coating that sort of reflects that sun back out. So it's not tremendously effective in terms of the winter heat gain or getting that heat. But definitely we can feel it. The south part of the home is warmer than the north part of the home when on a sunny day. So it does work. The other thing that's worked quite well is we have operable windows above our stair at a high level. And when we open other windows, we do get a breeze through, and we have the hot air vented out of the house. And this is also where we've put in triple glazing. So we thought that we'd have some warm, moist air in this area, and we really wanted to make sure that it didn't condense on the windows. And so we put in triple glazed windows up here. So this stack effect and sort of exhausting of the warm airs works quite well. And except for very, very hot, humid days. That's when, as you all know, you're stuck. If you want to be comfortable, you're almost have to rely on mechanical cooling. Now, having said that, with more insulation, you can do that efficiently. At least we've found that it works quite well. And just anecdotally, we noticed the air conditioning system doesn't turn on as much as in the old home. The house is sealed and well insulated, so it keeps the cool air in. So what we did was for insulation was we had about 28 R28 in the walls, and the next slide will show you the type of insulation that we used. On the ground floor with the brick walls, on the back of the brick, we had R10, and the reason we did not go higher than that is we did not want to get into a situation where no heat was getting to those walls, because they're designed to be warm so that you don't get a freeze thaw spalling issue on the exterior, and that's pretty important. And R10 was the rule of thumb that we applied to providing sort of the balance between insulating the wall but still making sure that some heat does transfer to the wall to warm it in those days where you get the high swings in temperature, when you get rain in the day when it's not zero and then it freezes overnight. That brick has to have an opportunity to dry. The header spaces in the basement were about R25. The walls were R13, R14 in the basement, and our overhangs, we really insulated very high, so we didn't want to have cold floors here. So we filled those cavities with insulation and insulated on the exterior. And then the roof was about R40. And so the insulation we used in the basement was a rock wool, a mineral fiber, stone wool insulation. And at the roof, on the second floor, we had spray foam, a closed cell medium density polyurethane spray foam. And then on the exterior, which I don't have a photo of, is a polyiso, it's a short form exterior insulation on the surface. The walls on the second floor and on the ground floor were spray foam as well, the medium density spray foam. And then on the exterior, we had extruded polystyrene. So it's that, you're probably familiar with it, it's the rigid board insulation on the exterior. That was not my first choice. We did this during the pandemic, and I could not get the kind of stone wool insulation that I wanted. It was a 6 or 7 month wait for it, and we couldn't halt construction and wait for it. So I chose the next best thing for us. The mechanical systems, I'll sort of point to the photos as I mention them. We have a 2-ton air-sourced heat pump, which the condenser is tucked in at the back here, you can see. And it's a central heat pump in that it supports a central air system. And there's an air handler inside it. The air handler looks like a conventional furnace, and it blows warm or cool air throughout the house, through ducts in the house, just like a forced air gas furnace would. This unit here has a auxiliary electric backup. So what that means, it's essentially an electric furnace. So on the cooler days when the heat pump is no longer efficient, so when there's not enough heat in the air for the heat pump to draw from and heat your home, for example, it relies on the electric furnace to back it up. And I'll talk a little bit about how that system's working and not working for us. And it's, I hope, user error, but I'll get to that in a moment. We have a humidifier installed. We have a HRV, or heat recovery ventilator, which is a code requirement. We have heat recovery on the sanitary stack to recover heat from the wastewater. with also, this is also a Ontario building code requirement. And this is our new gas-fired on-demand heater that replaced the hot water tank. The home has a 200 amp electric service, which is split into two. 100 amps go to the basement. We've created the possibility of a separate unit in the basement, and 100 amps go to the house. That's 100 amps is a little bit challenging to have all of what we have here in terms of the heat pump, but we've made it work, but it's quite tight. And we have installed a rough-in for an electric. Sorry, I'm just going to go back for a second for an electric car charging station. That's just a rough-in at the moment. We assume down the road that we'll probably have some kind of an electric vehicle. The utility bills, which is always a question for everyone, and this is where I'll get to where things are working or they're not working. The electric bill for the home that I showed in the beginning was about $910 over 10 months. The reason I'm using 10 months is I only have 10 months of information for the new home because we've not been in for a full year yet. So I'm trying to compare apples to apples as much as I can. So over 10 months, our electrical bill pre-renovation was $910, and the gas bill, which you can see over here, was about $1,014. So about $900 and $1,000, roughly $2,000 rounding up. Moving forward to the house now, and just a reminder, this is the original home as renovated. So it had better windows, it had some insulation, it had an efficient gas furnace. So it wasn't just an original 100-year-old home. It did have some improvements, and it was reasonably comfortable as far as temperature goes. But I will say the furnace did cycle on and off quite a bit, meaning we were losing heat. The electrical bill now is quite a bit higher, $2,400 over 10 months. I'll get back to that in a second. The gas bill dramatically lower at $280, so roughly $2,700. So you're looking at about an $800 increase. So a couple of things to consider. The rates have gone up, and I haven't factored that in here. So that's where it's not comparing apples to apples. So rates have gone up. And I will say this number, I think, has some user error in it. I received some confusing and I'd say hopefully wrong advice from Carrier and speaking to them in terms of how to use the heat pump. And maybe it was just a misinterpretation on my part, but the gentleman described to me that coming to 5 degrees or 0 degrees, that heat pump wouldn't be as efficient and would be working harder. And to prolong the longevity of the equipment, he suggested switching over to the electric heat, just a manual switchover. And that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted the two systems to talk to each other so that I wouldn't have to do a manual switchover. And my understanding is that they would, and the heat pump would only use the electric backup as much as it needed to. So the heat pump would determine its level of efficiency and use the electric backup only to the degree it needed to. And in speaking to our mechanical engineer, he said, yes, that's how it should be. So instead of me toggling on and off between heat pump and the electric heat based on the temperature outside, I should have just left it to do its thing. And I didn't wait and see. I did the toggling. So hopefully next winter, I'm going through the process right now with the mechanical engineer and Carrier to try and figure out exactly what was installed. I should know, and my trade should have been able to explain this to me, and I'll get to that towards the end of the presentation.
Rajko, just a
yes.
Just a quick question, but otherwise the system as it is said right now should be able to communicate between each other.
I believe it should.
Yeah,
And that's certainly what I'd asked for, and that I believe that's what the mechanical engineers specify. But
right.
sometimes, as you all may know, what you specify and what you get is not the same. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm hoping it is, and I even want to say I'm after my initial conversations recently, I'm confident that it is, and that maybe I just wasn't using it right, based on my misinterpretation maybe of what the early carrier rep was saying. So one other thing that we did was we made the house solar ready. We didn't install photovoltaic panels or solar panels or hot water solar, but what we did do was make sure that the roof structure could accommodate them in the future. And I did have a few studies done to see what the house would generate, and it's approximately 5 kilowatts, I think, or almost 6 kilowatts. System. So it was a 5,500 kilowatts per year estimated solar. So there was a sort of layout done. You can see here on the roof where the panels were placed. And again, we sized the joists so that in the future they could be installed. And the installation is quite simple. My understanding, as it was explained to me, was they're weighted down essentially with patio stones, and our plan was to do a feed-in tariff program. So it wouldn't be, we weren't planning on battery systems in the house, just the feed-in tariff program, which would mean the connections would all be, I think, pretty much exterior to the home. So that when I didn't need to route anything through the house. One thing that was important in the renovation was building the home's resilience. I know we've all probably experienced a higher frequency of storms, and storms that are stronger and cause more damage. The area in Toronto we live in has quite an old electrical grid, and so we found in some of the storms we experienced that our grid would go down a little easier and would stay off a little longer. Particularly the one, I think somewhere around 2011, actually 2012 or 2013, in the winter, the ice storm we had, at least across Toronto and obviously broader than that, but in Toronto was hit quite hard, and we were down for over a week. So that was a real sort of lesson for us that we'd like to sort of build a home that's a little bit more resilient. So part of that was keeping a gas line for now, and we'd like to install a gas fireplace. And how we'd like to use that is when the electrical grid goes down, the gas does not. It's on pressure. So you could run a gas fireplace. So the plan would be in a prolonged outage would be to use the gas fireplace to heat the home to a reasonably like a comfortable level, not the same as if everything was running regularly, but just to keep the house from freezing, to keep the pipes from freezing, to keep us to be able to stay in the home. And the other thing we did was put in a Generalink transfer switch in case of a power outage. So what we can do, and that's what you can see right here, and what we can do is with an extension cord, connect that to a generator. And my plan is to purchase a smaller tri-fuel generator, and which means we have an option of using 3 fuel types. The preferred one would be natural gas, and we can hook that. The plan would be to hook that generator up to what the gas barbecue outside is now hooked up to, and it would then feed power through the meter here to our panel. And then we would be selective about what power we would run. So, run the refrigerator, we'd run a few convenience lights, a few outlets, but a smaller generator will not power this home as if the power didn't go off. So we would not have our heat pump, for example. We would not have an electric furnace. Those are larger draws that a smaller generator wouldn't cover. But that's where we would rely on the gas fireplace to gently heat the home. Fortunately, we haven't come across that yet because I'm not quite ready. I don't have a generator yet. So this is the final product. So looks, I think, pretty close to the early rendering. We've moved in, like I said, about 10 months ago, and have been pretty comfortable. And I'll get to the things we might do differently in just a minute. So some of the challenges during COVID, supply chain was a big issue, and sometimes you're not sure if it's an issue or not. For example, our mechanical engineer had specified a different heat pump system. The trade said they can't get that. But they can get the carrier. So we went with the carrier. So we had a lot of that, not just with the mechanical systems, but in general, it was a challenge, as you've all heard, I'm sure, in the media, getting certain supplies and materials was quite a challenge. We had a challenge with some trades, not all for sure, but some trades were a real challenge. And there's I found at least a real knowledge gap in terms of newer systems. There's a real comfort level with the trades to do it the same way they've done the house before, and the house before that, and the house before that. And that was a real challenge for us. And as soon as you asked them to do something differently, the question was, well, why? Why do you want to do that? I had that over and over again on the heat pump. Well, why? Why do you want to do it? Just throw in a gas fireplace. So they're not, I found they're not really, a number of them aren't really on board with sort of being innovative, I guess. Certainly not all of them, just some of them, and that was one of our challenge. And then, of course, with usually the same trades, the trust and workmanship, we did have a challenge, and we really had to be on top of them with that. And frankly, like the whole confusion around the heat pump, I think part of that was the trust and the innovation and so on. Installing them is pretty easy, but getting them to work properly, and certainly I think I have to go, and perhaps this is maybe the best way to do it, and have a third party commission the system and check it and make sure that it's all working right. So they have just an invested interest in commissioning the system, so they didn't install it, so they don't have to defend any mistakes or anything like that. So the last slide before we get into a discussion was, I called second chance. And so if we were to do it again, what might we do differently? A few things. I think I would have increased the insulation. We had a reasonable amount of insulation. We certainly met code, and we're a couple of points in our value higher. I think a little bit. I think it would have been worthwhile going further. It's certainly, I don't know if it's possible to just one day take any existing home, certainly ones in the 50s or earlier, that are uninsulated, and swap out the furnace and put in a heat pump. I don't know if that would work. So this, as you can see in this project, a lot more went into the home, passive strategies, mechanical strategies, reasonably, or I don't think this home is highly insulated. I think it's adequately insulated. So I would have liked to have gone further with the insulation values of the walls and the roof, and I think that would have helped. I think some of our windows were a little too large. A few of them I would have liked to have made about 25% smaller. And I think that would have helped with, again, just be an increase in insulated wall and less heat loss through the windows. Even high performing windows have quite a bit of heat loss. And triple glazed windows, I would have I think I would have liked to have gone to triple glaze for all our windows. It is obviously an increased cost. However, we did have a price, and I didn't find it totally unreasonable. And I think that would have helped. Anecdotally, putting your hand on the triple glaze window that we do have and comparing it to a double glaze window, it's quite a difference. I was quite surprised, and that was what cued me to say, "Wow, this is quite a bit different," and I think it would have been worth the investment, at least for us. One of our more challenging trades was the mechanical trade, so I think I would have liked to have had a different trade, and I maybe should have recognized that earlier on and made a different decision there. There's such an important trade. There's framing was critically important, and the insulating trade was critically important, and the mechanical trade was critically important. And those are big systems, expensive systems that you can't really change after, or it's difficult and expensive to change after. So they're really important. The heat pump brand, it's hard to say when you don't have others to compare against that I've experienced, but I can say the one we have is, I find, anecdotally seems to be a little bit loud compared to others I've heard. It's not tremendous or anything like that, but seems to be a little bit louder. And one thing that maybe I should have considered, I think, is maybe a heat pump for the domestic hot water. We went with a more efficient system with the gas on demand than the water tank. But maybe the next step we should have considered is a heat pump that's dedicated to the domestic hot water, which I know are available, or even solar hot water is another option as well. So that was where, our day-to-day, we still have day-to-day gas use because of that. And maybe that's the next step in 10 years or so. So that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'll pass it over to Desi to moderate, I guess, from here.
Thank you very much, Rajko, for joining us and for providing your experience in the presentation, and thanks for your time. Thanks for everyone who joined us and for your questions. Stay tuned for more of our decarbonization journeys, and if you are one of these people that are taking this journey, maybe you can share it also with us. With this, I'm gonna end today's webinar and wish everyone a great evening.
Thanks very much, Desi. Thanks for the work you do.
Yeah, thanks so much.